Hello, fight fans, and welcome to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. I am your host, Dylan Brewski, and this is the 10th episode, which, isn't the biggest of deals in the world, but to me, if you know me, this is a huge step for me. I wasn't sure if I was going to make a YouTube channel for the longest time. I've done it. I've tried to stick with it for the most part. We are now 10 episodes in. I hope for many, many, many more that I can bring to you guys every Monday. But we do have quite a bit to talk about today. We have PFL, the welterweights and the women's lightweights squared off, plus random lightweight matchup between Anthony Pettis and Miles Price. I originally was going to talk about Bellator 280, but then I watched the main event, and there's nothing to talk about. I have no desire to talk about that event, so I'm just going to skip over it. I don't care to talk about Bellator 280 because it wasn't that eventful in the first place. We also had UFC 274 2 nights ago. It was absolutely phenomenal. It had its highs and it had its very, very lows. I'm sure if you watched it, you know what the low point was. But I will take a deep dive into that. And then I will be giving my predictions for UFC Fight Night. Jan Blachowicz versus Alexander Rakic. Huge matchup in the light heavyweight division. But we are going to start off with the PFL for right now. I'm just going to go over a few of the fights that I really enjoyed watching. First one, Rory McDonald gets a first-round victory over Brett Cooper. The real reason I want to talk about this fight, it was so cool to see Rory McDonald get back in the octagon, get back in the cage, get a big win, a quick win at that. I mean, he's first place in the welterweight division right now because he was the only one to get a finish, and it was in the first round, so he has a big gap for first place right now. So huge props to Rory McDonald. Always cool to see former UFC guys get big wins like that. And speaking of former UFC guys getting big wins, Anthony Pettis comes back after a very, very disappointing 2021 PFL season. He lost both fights, obviously didn't make the playoffs, losing both fights. He comes back and he gets a first-round submission by triangle choke. He was absolutely dominant in this fight. It was so awesome to see a guy that was at the caliber of fighter that he was for so long, kind of fell off towards the tail end of his career, come back, get a huge win like this, get first place in the lightweight division. Obviously, like I said, that was kind of a random. They had all the other lightweight matchups 2 weeks ago, but then this one they had with the welterweights, women's lightweights. I don't know why, but nonetheless, huge win for Anthony Pettis, putting him in first place for the lightweight division. Next up, the co-main, the two-time champ Ray Cooper III versus Carlos Leal, and you got to give huge props to Carlos Leal. He went out and he dominated this fight. Ray Cooper did not seem to be on his A game for this fight whatsoever. He did not look the greatest in this fight. I believe he landed like under 30 strikes. He looked gassed almost immediately and got basically dominated. He showed a little bit in that third round trying to make a comeback, but it was too late. Carlos Leal dominated the first 2.5 rounds of that matchup. Huge win for Carlos Leal, though. So congratulations to him getting the win over the two-time champ. And then the last fight I want to talk about for the PFL event was, of course, the main event. Kayla Harrison, arguably the best women's fighter on the planet right now. And yes, there is a true argument for this, for how dominant she has been in the PFL versus Marina Makina. I gotta admit, Marina was actually really impressive in this fight. I was going in expecting Kayla Harrison to absolutely dominate like she usually does. And Marina held her own in that matchup. I mean, she was getting up off of takedowns. She was throwing caution to the wind with some strikes. It was a very impressive showing. Nonetheless, though, Kayla Harrison was the better fighter in this matchup. She showed it. She was absolutely dominant, and she was able to come out with a decision victory, tying her for second place in the women's lightweight division. Probably not the ending that Kayla Harrison wanted, but nonetheless, I'm sure she will take the win and move on to the second fight. That will happen, I believe, in June. I believe sometime in June they start back up again with the second round of regular season fights. But just a little rankings update. Like I said, I'm just going to go over the men's lightweight real quick, just to point out that Anthony Pettis did jump over Rosh Manfio and get first place solely with 6 points. Rosh Manfio has 4 points, and then 3 others are tied with 3 points. In the welterweight division, Rory McDonald was the only one to get a finish. He got a first-round finish, so he has 6 points. And then you have Carlos Leo, Delano Taylor, Jarrah Silawi, and Sadubo Sai all have 3 points. The rest of the fighters four of the fighters have 0 points. Ray Cooper, he did miss weight, so he actually got docked a point. He is at -1, so he has a lot of ground to cover if he wants a chance to make it 3 straight PFL championships. And then in the women's lightweight, Larissa Pacheco, she was able to get the finish, so she has 6 points. And then you have Kayla Harrison, Martina Jindrova, Olena Kolesnik, and Julia Budd, all with 3 points. 4 fighters with 0, and then Jaina Fabian has -1 because, just like Ray Cooper, she missed weight, so she did get docked a point. And also, she's got a lot of ground to make up. Luckily for both Ray Cooper and Jaina Fabian, there was only 1 finish in each of their divisions. So it's still a doable task if she wants to get into that situation, into the playoffs. But that's enough about PFL. I want to dive straight into UFC 274. This was a very, very exciting event for the most part. Like I said, there were some lows, and unfortunately, the co-main event was one of those very, very low moments of that event. But I'm going to start off with some of the prelim fights. First fight I want to talk about, Blagoy Ivanov versus Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Ivanov won this fight by decision. I don't think he won this fight by decision. I don't think he was the better fighter whatsoever. De Lima outstruck him. He got a takedown. Ivanov got 0 takedowns and was outstruck. I thought the first 2 rounds were easily Marcos Rogerio de Lima's rounds. And then the third was definitely up for discussion. Ivanov kind of controlled it. You could tell they were both pretty gassed, so there wasn't a whole lot happening in that third round. But still, nonetheless, I really thought that De Lima took the first 2 rounds, and very clearly, I'm surprised it was a unanimous decision, too. All 3 judges scored at 29-28 in favor of Ivanov. I honestly saw De Lima getting the first 2 rounds. Nonetheless, though, it was a very fun fight to watch. There was a lot of big moments. They were throwing haymakers. They were getting huge De Lima got a huge takedown where he lifted him up. It was awesome. It was a great fight. Nonetheless, congrats to Ivanov. He was able to get a big win, snapping, I believe, a 2-fight losing skid. So, big win for him. Probably will end up keeping him in the rankings for now, also, considering he was number 15. But congrats to Ivanov. But nonetheless, I think De Lima should have won that fight. And then next up, Brandon Royval versus Matt Schnell. I got to take a quick moment to apologize to Brandon Royval. I thought he was going to be a little hesitant in this fight. I feel like he has a tendency to kind of wait for his opponent. And while that did happen where he kind of waited for Matt Schnell to come at him and make a mistake, it paid off for him. This was a very quick fight, but Matt Schnell came out very aggressive. He was able to get a knockdown on Royval, get on top. Royval was able to get the reverse it and get the dominant position, and they ended up getting the choke to win the fight. It seemed very odd, though. It was a very quick tap out, and Matt Schnell almost like panicked. He was like tapping with both of his hands. It was kind of a weird situation, but nonetheless, it was an absolute great performance for Brandon Royval, getting a big win. Like I said last week, the flyweight division is not that deep. So whoever won this fight was getting a big win over a top 10 opponent. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe jump Royval into that number 5 spot. I also wouldn't be surprised if they just left him at 6. But Matt Schnell might drop in the rankings a bit. He has been struggling as of recent. So I could maybe see him dropping a tad bit in the rankings. Not too much, though. But good performance by Brandon Royval, and congratulations to him for getting the win. Next up, Macy Chiasson versus Norma Dumont. Like I said last week, this is 2 ranked bantamweights moving up to featherweight. And this was a really, really good fight. Both ladies brought it, but Chiasson, she did just a little bit more. She outstruck Dumont, but a lot of her strikes ended up not being considered significant strikes, so she was more touching her. She wasn't really doing much damage with her strikes because Dumont was she closed the gap with significant strikes. It seemed like every time Dumont was hitting her, she was hitting her hard and getting these significant strikes. And then Macy got 6 takedowns, and that was the biggest difference for me. I thought Chiasson, with the dominant grappling, was able to get this fight, get this big win, because, I mean, I didn't understand why they had both moved up to featherweight being ranked bantamweights for this fight. But then I heard someone say, I don't remember who, so I apologize, but there's no one else in the women's featherweight division right now besides Amanda Nunes. You get 1 win in the featherweight division, you could be in line for a title shot versus Amanda Nunes. So I guess I kind of see it now when you put it in that perspective of you're really 1 win away from getting a title fight in the women's featherweight division right now. So overall, great performance by both. I think Norma Dumont has a very, very bright future in the UFC. And I hope that this doesn't take too much away from her, this loss. But great performance by both. Macy was a bit more active, so she was able to get the win. So big win for Macy Chiasson. And then next up is the premier prelim, Francisco Trinaldo versus Danny Roberts. Trinaldo really just looked like the better fighter in this fight. Danny Roberts seemed to be a step behind the entire fight. He didn't do a whole lot reaching for strikes. He only landed 34% of his strikes compared to Francisco Trinaldo, who scored 66% on his strikes. So that's a big, big gap for someone. Trinaldo was just as active as Danny Roberts. So he's getting in, he's picking his shots well, where Danny Roberts was just trying to reach and make contact with Francisco Trinaldo. It was a great performance by the veteran. Congratulations, Francisco Trinaldo, for getting that big win. And now to the main card. This was originally on the prelim, but unfortunately Donald Cerrone had to pull out day of. He had food poisoning that morning. I haven't heard any update. I'm hoping and I'm sure he is okay by now, but it is a very big disappointment to see kind of that classic throwback Donald Cerrone versus Joe Lozon, 2 veterans of the UFC, not be able to go at it. But nonetheless, the fight that took their spot at that first fight of the main card, Randy Brown and Chaos Williams, was awesome. I'm shocked this didn't get fight of the night. They didn't give a fight of the night, bonus out, I think this one had a very good case to be it. This fight was absolutely phenomenal. Both guys found great success with the striking. Both stunned their opponents multiple times in this fight. It was absolutely awesome. I think, honestly, it could have gone either way. I wouldn't have been mad if they gave it to Chaos Williams. Ultimately, 2 of the judges did give it to Randy Brown. He got the split decision victory. But honestly, I don't take anything away from Chaos Williams. This was a absolutely phenomenal fight. It was a great fight between 2 guys that looked to be very, very bright for the UFC in the future, and I can't wait to see where both of them go. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see a ranked opponent in Randy Brown's future. He had a great performance, and even with the loss, same with Chaos Williams. Chaos Williams had a great performance. Fun fight. Again, I'm very shocked that they didn't give a fight of the night or even just a performance of the night bonus to either one of these guys. It was absolutely amazing. And then next up we have the throwback Mauricio Shogun Hua versus Ovince St. Preux. Unfortunately, this fight kind of went how I thought it was going to go. It wasn't that active. Really, the most significant strikes that were landed was St. Preux with these vicious body kicks. If you looked at Shogun, I mean, his whole torso was just bright red. He hit him with 36 of his 62 significant strikes to the body. St. Preux did. So it wasn't the most exciting fight. St. Preux was the deserving winner in that bout. I was kind of shocked to see a split decision, but nonetheless, I think the right person won. Unfortunately, it wasn't in the most fun fashion per se. And then we got a little more fun. Michael Chandler and Tony Ferguson. This was everything I hoped this fight would be, and arguably more. This fight was absolutely fantastic. These 2 guys went to war for a little bit over a round. And it ended in, man, that was one of the, if not the most brutal knockout I have ever seen. If you don't like watching knockouts and you haven't seen this yet, I highly recommend you don't watch it. This was brutal. That was the longest I've ever seen anybody knocked out. Tony Ferguson was out for a very long time. You could even tell after the fight, after they raised Michael Chandler's hand, the official decision came in. Tony Ferguson stood up and wanted to be up there, but you could tell he didn't have a clue where he was at. I hope he's okay. Last, I believe I heard that his CT scans came back negative, which is a very, very big, very good sign for Tony Ferguson. But overall, you got to give so much credit. Michael Chandler is an unbelievable fighter. He is so good in striking and wrestling. He is just absolutely great. He got stunned in that first round. Tony Ferguson hit him hard. Got him with a clean shot, and he was stunned. Michael Chandler probably ended up taking that round if it would have ended up going to the judges ended up getting a takedown and was able to dominate him on the ground. And again, arguably took that first round from Tony after getting stunned like that. And then, this front kick to the face. I mean, he almost soccer kicked him. Just punted him right in the face. And Ferguson was out cold again for so long. It was kind of scary. But then, afterwards, Michael Chandler gives almost the promo of the year, at least so far. And it might last the entire year. This promo was great. He said he wanted the winner of Oliveira Gaethje for the lightweight title. I'm not sure if that will happen. I think there's other people that the UFC might want before Chandler fights for the title again. I could maybe see Islam Makhachev or a Beneil Dariush, whether they skip over that matchup or the winner of that matchup between those two gets Oliveira for the title or not, I don't really know. But also, Michael Chandler called out McGregor. And as we know, McGregor wants to come back at 170. He's bulked up a lot. Michael Chandler said he's willing to go up to 170. And I think Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor would be an all-time fight. Those two, that would be such a fun fight. Even leading up to it, the trash talk that these two would have, the hype behind this fight would be amazing. And I get there's a lot of people that don't like Conor McGregor. There's a lot of people that honestly probably don't like Michael Chandler. But I think those two in the octagon together would be unbelievable, especially at 170. Both of those guys bulked up like that. I mean, this fight would be amazing to watch those two. So I personally hope that's what happens, is Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor when McGregor's obviously able to come back. But moving on to the co-main event, a.k.a. the biggest disappointment of the night. Rose Namajunas and Carla Esparza has to be one of the top 5 worst UFC fights ever. This fight was... I mean, neither fighter was the aggressor. They combined for 68 total strikes landed in 25 minutes. Rose, honestly, I get it's her partner, husband. I can't remember what Pat Barry is to her. I get it, the relationship. I think she needs to find another cornerman. I think, or Trevor Whitman takes over and becomes her sole cornerman, because Pat Barry, after that third round, saying that the booze is good for her, that means she's doing everything right. She didn't do anything this entire fight, and then she's sitting there expecting to win this fight. I don't think either fighter should have gone up to that official decision and expected to win that fight. Neither of them did a whole lot. It was a very big disappointment, but honestly, I gotta say, Rose was the bigger disappointment. She was defending takedowns. That was the biggest thing. I expected her to go in slow for the first round because Carla is an amazing grappler. She is the best grappler in that division. And I get it, being hesitant to go after her very quick, but she was defending the takedowns. Carla Esparza was 2 for 11, and on the 2 takedowns she got, Rose got right back up. Those weren't a threat to her. And yet she was still not doing anything. And it cost her the title. Do I think the title should have changed hands? Maybe not, but you got to do something if you want to win this matchup. She didn't show enough. Granted, neither did Carla. I don't even think you could say there's an immediate rematch after this. Usually when you have close fights, split decision victories, and the title changes hands, you'll see a rematch immediately. I don't think you can get away with that. I don't think anybody wants to see Carla Esparza versus Rose Namajunas again. At least right away, I think the best option, I would say, have Marina Rodriguez just jump right in and face Carla Esparza. Marina Rodriguez versus Carla Esparza, and then, or if you don't want to throw in Marina Rodriguez right away, make Rose fight Marina Rodriguez or do a trilogy with Jessica Andrade. I think those are your 2 options right now, because I don't see why you would throw Rose right back into a title fight after the performance that those 2 put on. After what happened, I mean, there was booze flooding everywhere. That was one of the worst fights I've ever seen. And Rogan and Cormier and Anik were all talking about it. Like, this is horrible. How do you even judge this fight? Ultimately, Carla Esparza got the title. There's not much else to say about this fight. It was a big doozy. It sucks to see because I'm a huge Rose Namajunas fan. I love Rose Namajunas, and I'm so disappointed in that ending, in that whole fight. Not even just the ending, the whole fight. I'm very disappointed about, but it was saved. The main event was amazing. Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, full of excitement in the 3 minutes that this fight lasted. Obviously, as we all know, big controversy going into this fight. Oliveira missed weight by half a pound, got his title stripped of him, and he was not able to win the title back that night. Justin Gaethje, if he would have won, was able to become the lightweight champion still. Both fighters look great on the feet, which, I mean, no disrespect to Charles Oliveira. I think he's an amazing fighter. But I thought he stood zero chance on the feet with Justin Gaethje. And he stunned him. He knocked him down and was actually able to recover from a big knockdown by Justin Gaethje. And then Charles is just such a smart fighter that he got the knockdown, and instead of trying to go in and brawl with Justin Gaethje, he goes straight to jiu-jitsu. His bread and butter, what he knows Justin Gaethje's weakness is, the jiu-jitsu game, the grappling game. And he gets the neck and he gets the win. Now he is, of course, like the UFC said, he will be in the next title fight for the vacant lightweight championship. Now there's the discussion of who that is against. I mentioned some names before. Chandler called out Oliveira. Again, I don't see that happening. I think that they're going to do Chandler versus McGregor. I think with the title, like I said earlier, I think it's going to be Beneil Dariush or Islam Makhachev. Those two make the most sense. Dustin Poirier just got dominated by Charles Oliveira. Not just beat, he got dominated. So I don't see Dustin Poirier getting that title shot. McGregor, there was talks of McGregor getting the lightweight title shot, but he seems pretty dead set on going to welterweight, so I don't see that happening either. So I think Dariush or Islam are your two next best options. Again, whether you want them to fight and the winner faces Oliveira, or if you just want to skip that fight in its entirety, you want to give it to Dariush, you want to give it to Makhachev. I don't really have a preference. I think both are great fighters. I think both would be a fun fight to watch. Obviously, I lean a little bit more towards Islam. I think that would just be awesome to see. Either Islam is all he's cracked up to be and is the next Khabib Nurmagomedov, or all the hype shuts down because he gets dominated by Charles Oliveira, like we've seen so many of the top lightweights get done to them so far against Charles Oliveira. But again, it was a very, very fun event. Besides one moment in particular, the co-main event, Mauricio Shogun Rua and Ovince St. Prince wasn't the greatest, but also I didn't expect much from that fight, where I expected a whole lot from Rose and Carla, and it didn't deliver. But nonetheless, overall, that was a great card. It was a fun card to watch, and I can't wait to see what this leads to in the future, because the lightweight division is going crazy right now. We had two big lightweight matchups. That was very awesome to see. But that's enough for stuff that has already happened. That stuff is in the past. It's time to get into some fight predictions. UFC Fight Night. Jan Blachowicz, the former UFC light heavyweight champion and the number one contender in the light heavyweight division, takes on the number 3 contender in the light heavyweight division, Alexander Rakic. That's the main event of the Fight Night card, but I'm going to start off with the very, very first fight, Nick Maximov versus Andre Petroski. This, if you make bets on fights and there is a bet for over-under on takedowns, I don't care how high that takedown number seems, take the over. These guys both average a lot of takedowns. Petrosky is over 4 takedowns per 15 minutes, and Maximov is over 5.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. This is going to be a great grapplers duel. Maximov being undefeated, and he's in the same camp as the Diaz brothers. It's always fun when the Diaz brothers are involved. I'm sure they'll be there at the Apex on Saturday. So that's always fun to see when someone from the Diaz camp is there. But I'm very excited to see where Maximov's career goes. I think the hype train is going to get a little bigger after this fight. I think he's going to win this fight, and I think he's going to win in pretty dominant fashion by decision. I don't see a finish just because both of them are such good grapplers. I don't see either one of them getting the finish per se, but I do think that Maximov is going to dominate on the ground and get the decision victory. Next up is Tatsuro Terra versus Carlos Candelario. This flyweight matchup, both guys making their official UFC debut. Tatsuro, he's making his actual... He wasn't even in the contender series where Candelario came from. But Tatsuro is an undefeated flyweight, 10-0. I don't know a whole lot about him, but in his little interview that he's done so far, he did say that he can strike, he can kick, he can grapple. He's very well-rounded. We'll have to wait and see on that. Like I said with Candelario, he is a UFC Dana White Contender Series veteran. I believe he had 2 fights. He wasn't offered a contract, but he was offered this fight for him, considering he did lose, I believe, one of those Contender Series matchups. But honestly, I believe that Tatsuro, the hype is real. They don't hype guys like this, especially from Japan. You don't hear a lot of hype around Japanese fighters, and I'm hearing a lot of hype around this guy. He's 10-0 for a reason. Regardless if that's in the UFC or not, 10-0 is not easy to do. So I think that this fight is going to be quick. I have this as a first-round TKO. Tatsuro Terra gets his first UFC victory in his first ever UFC fight, improving his record to 11-0. Next up, we have Virna Jandiroba versus Angela Hill. Both fighters coming in struggling a little bit. Virna is 3-3 in her last 6 fights, but it's hard to hold it against her when you hear the 3 opponents she lost to. Her last fight was against Amanda Ribas. She lost that one. That's a top 10 contender in the UFC strawweight division. Fight before that was Mackenzie Dern, a top 5 strawweight contender in the world right now. And her first loss in the UFC was after her UFC debut is against the now champion Carla Esparza. Are you going to hold too much against her? Sure, maybe the Amanda Ribas one she could have won. But Mackenzie Dern, Carla Esparza, you're not going to hold too much against a fighter for losing those ones. Angela Hill coming in 1-4 in her last 5 fights, coming off 2 straight losses. She is needing a big win, big time. She needs something because she's not going to be able to keep going at this rate and expect to, 1, stay in the rankings, and 2, maybe even the UFC at this rate. Unfortunately, I don't think she gets it. I really like Virna Jandiroba. Like I said, her losses are coming against the best fighters in the world. Angela Hill, while she's losing to ranked opponents, she's not losing to the ranked opponents the caliber of fighters that Jandiroba's losing to. I have Verna winning this fight. I think her grappling's going to be too good for Angela Hill. I have Verna winning by second round submission. And then next up, two UFC veterans, Michael Johnson versus Alan Patrick. Neither guy has been incredibly active lately. They've both been fighting about once a year, and neither guy has a win since 2018. So both guys are looking for a win big time. Michael Johnson will look to keep this fight on the feet. He is a tremendous striker, and he has tremendous takedown defense, which bodes well because Alan Patrick will be looking to get this fight to the ground. He is a tremendous wrestler, but, I mean, Michael Johnson's got a 77% takedown defense percentage, which, with how many fights that Michael Johnson has fought in his career, that's insane. That's really high. He's faced far better fighters than Alan Patrick. I have Michael Johnson winning this fight by decision. The next fight is the premier prelim of the night. Viviane Araújo versus Andrea Lee. Two top 10 flyweights in the world right now, going at it 8 versus 9. This is a very intriguing matchup because both ladies are very well-rounded fighters. Both are definitely more comfortable on the ground, but they can stand up and strike if they need to. But I do expect this fight to be on the ground for a majority of it. It is a tough fight to call because both of them are so similar. But Araújo has tremendous takedown defense. I think she will find herself in the more dominant positions, and I do believe that she's going to be able to get the decision victory over Andrea Lee and get a big top 10 win under her belt going into the future. And then we move on to the main card. Jake Hadley versus Alan Nascimento. Another undefeated flyweight making his UFC debut in Jake Hadley. He brings in an 8-0 pro record into the UFC. Alan Nascimento is looking to avenge his debut loss versus Tyler Ulanbekov. Hadley has amazing jiu-jitsu. With half of his wins in his professional MMA career being by rear naked choke. So he will definitely try to get this fight to the ground, try to get the back, get the choke in. But also, in addition to that, he has great striking defense, which will bode well because Nascimento is a stand-up fighter. Nascimento does struggle on takedown defense too, with a unbelievable 16% defense on takedowns. That's not going to bode well against a great jiu-jitsu grappler like Jake Hadley. I think Jake Hadley continues his undefeated streak, improves to 9-0 with a first-round submission. I don't see this fight lasting long at all. Next up, Frank Camacho versus Manuel Torres. Torres is also making his UFC debut. We have a lot of UFC debuts. And he comes in with a very well-rounded skill set. He has proven in other organizations that he can submit you, he can knock you out, and he can go the distance and win by decision. Frank Camacho coming in after almost a 2-year layoff with a 2-fight losing skid. I'm not sure how well this is going to work out for him. Torres is coming in really, really hot right now. I think Torres has a bit of an edge with it being his debut. It's the biggest stage he's ever been on versus Camacho, who's been out of the game for a while, been on a losing streak for a while. I think that might play into his head a little bit. I have Torres winning by second round TKO. And now we have an intriguing women's flyweight division fight. the number 1 contender, Caitlin Chukagian, versus the number 9 strawweight contender, Amanda Ribas. This is really tough because usually when you see like a number 1 contender versus someone near the 9-10 range, it's either someone with a lot of hype around them or like a situation a few weeks ago with Jessica Andrade being the number 1 contender in the flyweight, but moving down to fight the number 10 contender in the strawweight. You usually don't see the lower ranked fighter moving a weight class and facing the number 1 contender immediately. Chukagian is a tremendous striker. She has a decent ground game. She was able to hold Jennifer Maia, who's a great grappler. She basically neutralized the ground game against Jennifer Maia, where Amanda Ribas makes her money off of the ground game. I really do think there's a big difference in talent in this matchup. I don't see it being that close. I do see it going to decision, but ultimately I have Caitlin Chukagian being the number 1 contender for a reason. And I think she's going to get a win it by decision. Next up, Davy Grant versus Luis Smolka. 2 very, very streaky fighters looking to get back on the winning side. Both have good ground games, decent stand-up. Smolka, most of his struggles did come in the flyweight division. I do think he's better at bantamweight, not trying to kill himself, getting down to 125. He's able to stay at a constant 135. I like him in this fight. Davy Grant hasn't done a whole lot to impress me. He doesn't have any really big wins, where Smolka does have a few big wins here and there. I'm going Smolka with a second round submission in this fight. Next up, we have the co-main event of the evening. Ryan Spann, number 13 light heavyweight in the rankings right now, versus Ion Cutelaba, he's trying to end a 3-fight winless streak. I'm kind of surprised he's in a matchup versus a ranked opponent, but Ryan Spann is also coming off of a loss. Granted, that loss was to a top 10 contender in this division, and Anthony Smith, a former title contender at that too. Both fighters are pretty well-rounded. Cutelaba definitely has the edge with the wrestling and the ground and pound, just the entire ground game in general. Spann is fairly even, but he does have a better stand-up game. I expect him to try to keep this fight standing, as he will have an edge in the striking department. I'm honestly going with Cutelaba in this matchup. I think he's very motivated to end this winless streak. I think the pressure will be too much for Spann after coming off of the big loss that he did. I'm going with Cutelaba by decision. And that brings us to the main event of the evening. 2 top 5 light heavyweights in the world. The former champ, the number 1 contender, Jan Blachowicz, versus the number 3 contender, up-and-comer, Alexander Rakic. I am so excited for this fight. I think, honestly, this is a number 1 contender fight for the winner of Glover Teixeira and Yuri Prochazka next month, June 11th, I believe it is. But honestly, I do believe this is wholeheartedly a number 1 contender fight. Jan Blachowicz, being the former champ, was on the roll of a lifetime, winning 5 straight fights, including giving Israel Adesanya, the middleweight champ, his first loss in his entire career. And then he ended up losing the title to Glover Teixeira, the veteran, the 42-year-old, I believe it is. Also was on the roll of a lifetime, able to get the championship. It was a great moment for Glover to get that championship, where Alexander Rakic has been great since joining the UFC. He's lost one of his 7 fights in the UFC, and he's coming off 2 straight wins against Thiago Santos and Anthony Smith. Those are 2 huge wins in this division. Both are definitely better on the feet. They do have a bit of a ground game. If it does go to the ground, I expect Jan Blachowicz to be the one that tries to initiate it going to the ground. He's a little bit better on the ground. Nonetheless, I think Rakic will be fine if he does ended up getting taken down. But ultimately, like I said, I said this a few months ago, like a month or 2 ago. I think there's a changing of the guard coming in the light heavyweight division. We have a lot of, not necessarily young, but younger compared to some of the top guys in this division. We just saw Magomed Ankalaev beat Thiago Santos. We saw Johnny Walker lose to Jamal Hill. We're seeing Jan Blachowicz versus Alexander Rakic. We're seeing Glover Teixeira versus Yuri Prochazka. I think that the coming of the new guard, with Hill getting a win over Johnny Walker, with Magomed Ankalaev getting a win over Thiago Santos, I think that continues with this fight. I think Alexander Rakic gets the win, becomes, in my opinion, the number 1 contender in the light heavyweight division. Next in line to face the winner of Glover Teixeira and Yuri Prochazka, I have Alexander Rakic winning by 4th round TKO. I think it's going to be a slow fight to start out. Both guys are very hesitant at first, but I do believe as the fight goes on, they'll both get more comfortable. I think Alexander Rakic gets the win, though. That's all for this week. Thank you all so much for listening. Again, this is my 10th episode. Huge milestone, at least in my eyes. I can't thank you all enough. If you've listened to 1 episode, if you've listened to all 10, if you've listened to however many, I can't thank you enough. Please keep listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Get your friends to subscribe, please. I'm trying to get my numbers up. But thank you all for all you have done for me. Everybody that's motivated me on this journey. I can't thank you guys enough. Next week, we have Bellator 281 reaction. If it's better than Bellator 280. Again, I didn't talk about Bellator 280 because it was a snooze fest. So I might talk about Bellator 281. Hopefully it's better so I can talk about it. And then, of course, I will have my reaction to UFC Fight Night, Jan Blachowicz versus Alexander Rakic. And I will be giving my predictions for the next week's Fight Night. That is Holly Holm and Vieira. Top 5 matchup in the women's bantamweight division. Very excited about that matchup. But for this week, you can find me on Instagram, on YouTube at Monday Night Fight Talk. You can find me on Twitter at MN Fight Talk. If you want to hear my general sports opinions, the Bolt is actually moving to Tuesdays, I believe at 3:30. I will update that if that is not the case. But we talk NFL, we talk NBA, MLB, all the sports that you can think of, we talk about on that show. So you can find me there on Squabo Says YouTube channel. I will put his link in the description. But as for now, thank you all again so much for listening. And I will see you next week, same time, same place, 5 p.m. Monday for Monday Night Fight Talk. Thank you all so much for listening.